Good day. Today we're going to learn exactly what is a text file and how do we use text files in Delphi. I'm going to show you a basic example of how we connect to the text file and then a little bit of grade 10 string handling, copy, pause, length, etc. to extract the data we need and to display it in a memo or a rich edit. So first things first, what is a text file? There's my text file, it has my data in it. Right? Each line of code is a person. So there's different people over here. How is this data structured? If we look at the first section over here, we have the person's surname, separated by a comma and a space. Then we have the person's first name, separated by a comma and a space, and then their date of birth. And that goes for every single person. That's how the data is stored. Alright? We are now going to set Delphi up so that we can read from that text file. Why is this important, by the way? Because up until now, we could not save data permanently. Whenever we closed or terminated our program, whatever data we had inside of it was lost and we had to re-enter from scratch for the next program. However, with text files, it's the first example that we have of storing data offline so that next time we start the program, it's there for us again. Good. An example, registration and a login password or username. You have to store that somewhere offline, right? So text files can be used for that as well. Okay, so I'm doing this in a Word document so that I can explain to you the concepts first and foremost before we get into code. That's another video. Right. First thing, we need a space for our variables, and the first variable we're going to create is a variable called tfile, and that's going to be a text file data type. Does it have to be called, this is just a variable, right? So does it have to be called tfile? No. You can give it a more descriptive name if you like. What's important though is that our prefix is a little t so that we know that this is a text file variable. Just like we have s for string, I for integer, etc. Okay? It is a text file data type. Good. So now that we have our tfile variable, we can move on. The next important step is to connect our variable tfile with our text file, which is called namedate.txt. So I'm going to use a procedure called assign file, and this procedure has two parameters. The first parameter is what variable are we assigning it to? We're assigning the text file to the variable we just created, which was tfile. We have to specify. Next parameter, what is the name of the text file? The full name. And it has to be in single quotations. So that our one was called namedate.txt. Right? It must end in .txt because that is part of the name. Now, I'm not going to explain the section where we have a whole long file path. I'm going to assume that we've saved this text file in the same folder as our Delphi program, so we can just put the name of the text file there. Okay, let's keep it simple for now. Step number 3. Now that our text file belongs to a variable called tfile, which we're going to use from here on out, we need to open up tfile so that we can use the data inside. And to do that, we're going to use another procedure called reset. And reset only has one parameter, one piece of information that's required. That's the name of the file we want to reset, which is tfile. What does reset do? It's going to first and foremost open the file and put it in RAM so that we can access it. Right? Very important. We can't do anything unless it's open. It's also going to take the cursor and put it right at the beginning. It's going to reset the file for us. Okay? So if you have a look over here, the cursor, I've just placed it at the end. If we try to read from this text file now, we would get only two empty lines because the cursor started at the end. Reset is going to move it to the beginning so that we can start reading line by line from the beginning. Okay, so that's what we want. So there we go. Now that we're done with the opening procedures, we need to find a way to read the data from this text file. It's open now, but how do we read the data? Here's the text file. We cannot read all of it at once. Okay, that's not how it works. We have to read it one line at a time. So we're going to use a loop. We're going to write code to read one line, and then that loop is going to do it for the rest of the lines automatically for us. So the question now is, what loop to use? Do we use a for loop, a while, or a repeat loop? Immediately, a for loop is out of the question. Why? Because we do not know how many times this loop, how many lines of data we have. Yes, here we can count because it's a small amount of data. But what happens if there were thousands and thousands of lines? I don't want to count that manually. So I'm going to let the computer use a conditional loop, like a while loop, to read all the lines until it ends. Okay. Also, what happens if after I'm finished my program, I come and I add another line and I start writing more information? Then I would have to change my code as well. Okay, I don't want to do that. So again, no for loop. We're going to use a conditional loop, aka a while loop. Right, so this is what the while loop is going to look like. While not EOF Tfile do. So what does that mean? Of course, while means we're using a while loop. Not EOF. Okay, EOF means end of file. End of file. So while we're not at the end of the file, which file? T file. Then the loop is going to continue. So in short, this loop will continue to execute the code until it reaches the end of the file. Okay, and that's exactly what we want, right? Good. This line of code doesn't change. It's usually always like this, so I mean, it will be simple to remember. It looks foreign to you now because you're not used to it, but believe me, you do this once, twice, 3 times, and it's second nature to you. Okay, now we have a loop. We can start reading the data from the loop. And I'm going to just say over here in brackets, in the loop. In fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to write that over there because the next couple of lines are all going to be inside of our while loop. Now that we're inside the while loop, first things first, let's read the first line. Let's take it out so that we can work with it. So there's the first line from our text file. Remember, I told you that we can't take it all at once. We have to take one line at a time. So we start with line number 1, of course. And there's a special procedure called ReadLine, which is going to take this entire line out of the text file and it's going to place it into a variable that we can work with. So that is called, that procedure is called ReadLine, readLN, and ReadLine needs 2 parameters. The first parameter is, where are you reading from? Well, we're reading from Tfile. Okay, that's our text file. The second parameter is this line that you just read, where are we going to put it? So we're going to create a little temporary variable called sLine, and that must be a string. This name is not important again, but it's just the default name that we go for. sLine because it's one line of text from the text file. We're only going to do one line at a time. So there we go, sLine. So we're reading from T file one line and we're putting it into S line. Now that we have that first line in the variable called S line, we can now work with it and we can adjust it and we can pull out parts of it that we need. Because if you look at it at the moment, it's not very nice to read, right? It's just all bunched together. So I'm going to, over here, I'm going to, in the middle, I'm going to say S line, I'll make it bigger now, S line equals that. Okay, let's make that, oopsie, let's make it. So this is what S line is at the moment. And yes, S line will change depending on what number line you are on. But for the first line, this is what S line, the variable, contains. So let's start. We want to first take out the surname so that we can display it, right? So I'm going to create a variable called S surname as well. S surname. How do we take only a portion out of S line? We use the copy function. So I'll say copy, or sorry, I'll say S surname is equal to copy. Copy, where are we reading from? Where are we copying from? We're copying from S line, right? That's what S line is at the moment. We're copying from S line. Where are we going to start? We're going to start from the beginning of S line. So position number 1. How many positions are we going to copy? That's a problem. We don't know how many positions we're going to copy. Every single person, if we go back to the text file, has a surname with a different number of characters in. Look at this long one, and then look at this short one. So how do we know how many characters we have to copy for the surname? It's different. So we can't do this line of code yet. We're going to postpone it. We must first find the position. Let's use this. We must first find the position of the comma in S line. So we're going to use the pos function. I'm going to create a variable called ipos. Again, the name of the variable is not super important, but ipos is descriptive enough so we know what it's there for. Integer. Okay. Ipos is equal to, and now to find the position of anything, we need to use the pos function. Pos needs 2 pieces of information. First, what are we looking for? In quotation, we're looking for a comma. Okay, the comma must be in quotation. Next parameter, where are we looking for this comma? The comma is in S line. So we're looking inside of S line. This function is going to give me back a number inside the variable ipos. We can just have a look over here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the comma is position number 7. So ipos for this particular line will be 7. Okay, good to know. Now let's go back to our copy function. S surname is equal to copy. We're copying from S line. We're going to start at position number 1. How many positions are we going to copy? Well, now we know where the comma is, right? So we're going to say ipos. We're going to copy up until position number ipos. But there's still one problem. See, I'm going to say -1. Why would I say -1? Because if I say copy up until the position of the pos, the surname is going to contain the comma as well. That's not right. Okay, the person's surname here is De Vet, not De Vet with a comma. So ipos, including that, I'm going to say -1 so that it only copies the surname. Now the surname will always end at ipos -1, always. So I'm going to say ipos -1. There we go. Now we have the surname. Good job. We have the surname and we can display that later on. Now that we're done with the surname, I need to get the name. Right? And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and delete the surname from sline. I already have it. It's stored safely inside the variable called surname. So I have it, no problem. Okay, so let's say delete. This is a procedure. A procedure. Where are we deleting from? We're deleting from the variable sline. Where are we going to start deleting from? The beginning, position number 1. How many characters are we going to delete? We already have the position of the comma. Remember, that's IPOS. This time we're not going to say -1 because we want the comma to go also. Okay, we just want the name and the date of birth to be left. This surname and comma, we're done with it. It must go. The surname is already over there. So that's what we will do. Right, now let's get the name. So I'm going to create another variable here for sname. That's going to store the name Avery. Now, if I can show you, we've deleted this. So sline is now equal to Avery, comma, and the date of birth. We literally deleted the surname out of that variable. Okay. Now we need to find the position of the next comma because we need to know where the name ends and the date of birth begins. So again, I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to reuse IPOS is equal to pos. We're looking for the comma again. Okay, the old comma was deleted. We're looking for the next one, and we're going to find that in sline as well. So the same line as before. Now sname is going to be equal to copy. We're copying from sline, and we're starting at position 1 because remember we deleted the surname. So position number 1 is now where the name starts. Alright, so we're copying from sline, from position number 1, the beginning, essentially, up until where, how many positions are we going to copy? IPOS -1. Again, IPOS, we just said that IPOS is going to be equal to the number, position of the comma. We want to copy the name, not the comma as well. So we're going to say IPOS -1, and that will always be the end of the name. Okay. Once we're done with that, the name is now safely stored in the variable called sname, so we can delete it from sline, right? We don't need it there anymore. The only thing we now need is the date of birth. So I'm going to go ahead and say delete this procedure. Where are we deleting from? sline. We're starting at position number 1, and we're going to delete up until and including the position of the pos, the position of the comma. So all of that is going to go, and there it goes. Gone. See, sline is getting affected. By the way, the original text file will not change. It's still going to be what it is. Just this temporary variable is changing. We're taking out what we need and we are restoring it. So now sline is equal to the date of birth. So I can go ahead and just say, all right, s date of birth, and over there I'll say s date of birth is equal to sline. Right? The date of birth, this variable, is equal to sline because we've cropped sline so that it now only contains the date of birth. And that's what we need for the date of birth, right? There we go. So now you can see why that string handling from grade 10 is so important. We need it moving forward for a lot of stuff. So now we have 3 variables, the surname, we have the name, and we have the date of birth of this one particular line of code. Right, we're not done yet. What we're going to do now is we're going to display that how we want. So I'm going to say read output dot lines dot add, and I'm going to start off by saying sname we can choose whatever order we want. Now, we have it in individual variables. Plus, and we're going to leave just an empty space there so that the surname and the name aren't squashed together. S surname, right, with another empty space so that they're not squashed, and then S date of birth. And that will be the end of the while loop. Okay, there's a lot of lines of code, but this is all inside of the while loop. Now this is for one line of data. This was all for this one line of data. Fortunately, because we have a while loop, we don't have to do this again. What's going to happen now is it's going to check after the first line. Am I at the end of the file yet? No. You must now go to line number 2. It will do that for us, and it will do everything again for line number 2, and it will display it in the rich edit, and then it will do the same all over again for line number 3, display it in the rich edit until it reaches the end of the file, and then it will stop. So let's just have a quick glimpse at what our red output will look like. It will say after line 1, it will say something along the lines of, the name was Avery, sorry, Avery, space, the vet, space, and the date of birth, which was